Started. Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. In today's session, we are going to be focusing on some of the best practices for not-for-profit organizations. And without stealing too much of the thunder, you'll hear from our expert guests on some of the valuable insights that you can get from your finance systems. My name is Sahil Malhotra, and I am the partner manager at Approvalmax. Over the years, we've worked with a number of not-for-profits, and today we'll be hearing from our partners at Grant Thornton New Zealand, who are experts in the not-for-profit sector and effectively have seen it all. So we're very excited to be hearing from them about their experience and the insights they'll be sharing with us today. Just a bit of housekeeping. Today's webinar will be recorded, and a copy of it will be sent to everyone who has registered. Throughout the session, we'd like to keep it interactive. So in order to do that, we have a few polls that will pop up on your screen with a few options, and your participation will be extremely valuable and very much appreciated. We also have a Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom screen so that you can just access it by selecting the Q&A button and by typing in your question. At the end of the session, we will have a few minutes in which we'll answer all of your questions that come up. So please jump in and be an active part of the session. We would love to hear from you, and it will also allow us to design our future webinars more effectively in terms of how what you'd like to hear and what questions come up. So again, for those who have just joined, we are going to be talking about best practices for not-for-profit organizations and the valuable insights that you can get from your finance systems. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome from Grant Thornton New Zealand, Barry Baker. Barry, please take yourself off mute, and we'll start off with an easy one. Who are you and what do you do at Grant Thornton?
Thanks, Al. Isn't it the phrase of the century is take yourself off mute, but it's a very good one. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I won't talk too much about myself, but I'm really proud to lead the NFP advisory practice here at Grant Thornton in New Zealand. And effectively what we do is we try to help the organisations actually get both insights and safety and information out of their internal systems. And some of that we do ourselves. Some we have other professional partners, and of course we have awesome software and suppliers like Approvalmax to help us with it as well. And of course, I'd like to think I do this all myself, but I have a very capable team with us as well. And I'd ask Jadene to introduce herself and take herself off mute.
Onto it, Barry. Thanks for that. So my name's Jadene. I work with Barry in the Business Advisory Services team here at Grant Thornton in Wellington. I'm a self-confessed finance function nerd and nosy person. I love getting into the detail of an organisation, especially not-for-profits. And that's just to find out what makes them tick. And the finance process is often central to that. Once I get a good picture of what's going on, I love working with clients to identify opportunities for process improvements and help them to develop reports that give better insights and information to their decision makers.
Thank you, Barry and Jadene. Thanks for the introduction. It's great to have you on board. Welcome. And Barry, I'd like to hand over to you to take us through the agenda for today and share your valuable learnings with us.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're sort of a bit of a logical flow for today. I'm going to talk a little bit first about our view on the NFP environment, what that looks like, what some of the challenges are. Then we're going to just talk about an overall picture of an NFP finance function. What does it actually look like from end to end? I want to touch on the 3 Ps. I won't go too much detail now, what the heck they actually are and why they're important. Then we'll move nicely into some of the pressure points or problems we've seen over the years with our clients and contacts. And then after we get past that sort of sobering part, we'll talk about some solutions. And part of those solutions is a bit of a focus on a product stack or solution set around software. Then we'll bring it to life with 3 real-life cases where we've applied the 3 Ps and some of the logic we've seen. And we'll talk about the sort of the before challenges and what the benefits were afterwards. And these are live clients, anonymized, of course. and then we'll move to Q&A. And in the Q&A, we'll do our best to answer the questions. And if there's anything too hard, we can take them away and come back to the group. Based on that, we'll talk about our view on the environment. I guess something I always say to a lot of my NFP clients is that being an NFP is actually quite hard. If you're in business, as long as you make money and don't break any laws, you're probably okay. But with NFPs, the level of accountability and visibility is just huge. You think about the stakeholder group, it's not just shareholders. We've got employees, volunteers, governance, funders, society in general, the people we're delivering services to. And most people just feel quite comfortable sticking their nose into NFPs operations as well and giving advice or feedback. And then that's a much wider level of accountability than most businesses have, short of the listers. The other part, of course, is we don't always have a lot of money. So the NFP side needs to prioritise its budgets to actually delivering services, delivering the objectives of why we exist. And I also have noticed over the years quite a disturbing, I guess, criticism, or a lot of people decide that actually you shouldn't be spending hardly anything on overheads, everything should go to services. But of course, in an organisation, NFP, it's complex. You need to have good processes. So there's that challenge too, where you might be running on the smell of an oily rag and actually be inefficient. Leads nicely into dispersed operations. Most or a lot of NFPs are actually operating at different physical locations from maybe where their head offices or office and where they deliver services. And of course, there was a little thing called COVID that may have turned up just recently as well. And that sort of accelerated the working from home and us learning how to operate from many different locations. And I've yet to see many NFPs, it's not a criticism, it's just a fact, that all the systems talk together well. You think about the membership database and the accounting system and the scheduling system, and often there've got to be a lot of manual interventions there, which can be painful. And I'll just touch on audits. Most commercial businesses don't have to bother with audits, but if we don't have our ducks in a row and all our authorities recorded, the year-end audit can be quite painful, and it's really necessary because we need that as a health check. So I guess out of that environment, that poses a few demands when we're trying to improve our internal processes or have any projects actually. And often any process change is difficult because the resources we need are often scarce. And I'm not just talking about cash there either. It's talking about expertise, and time is a big one as well. The NFPs, we tend to run really lean, and that doesn't give a lot of scope for actually improving ourselves. I guess there's a bit of a plug for us, but there's lots of good advisors out there. But what we have found too is some advisors, not talking about just accounting and advisory, we're talking IT, legal, sometimes don't really understand the NFP environment and how some of the language and approaches are different. And we need to be cognizant of that. And just sort of a final comment, I guess, on our experience around process review or change. It's my cynical view, I guess. There's only really two reasons why we make any changes or improvements, and it tends to be a big opportunity. So we've got a new contract or funding, or there's a disaster, something's on fire. And in my experience, normally it's something on fire that causes change. And that can be difficult too, because it may need you to speed up things. So look, while I've been talking, it'd be good if you could share your views on any of the environmental demands and challenges, and just in the chat at this stage, so we can all pick those up and be interested in seeing what you've got to say. And of course, you can guarantee several people in the audience will be interested in what you've got to say as well. Okay, so look, I'll just hand over to Jadene and she can take us to the next page. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Barry. So this diagram shows our view of a typical flow of information in your not-for-profit finance process, information getting into your system all the way through to your AGM and year-end process. So firstly, how does your information get into your accounting system? Is it manually through somebody keying it all in, or is it more software-based with bank feeds, integration with other software, and data capture software? Going through your accounting system, you then produce your outputs, being your reports. Generally, these fall under the categories of governance reporting, periodic reporting, and your compliance, the year end again. Another important part to this process is your forecasting and budgeting, using your information from your accounting system to report to governance and to assess your KPIs, also to kind of figure out what's happening in the future. And this process does provide a few opportunities for there to be breakpoints. We could go to the next slide, please, Barry. Thanks. So we all appreciate if you have quality inputs, you're going to get quality outputs. If you put rubbish into the system, you're going to get rubbish straight back out. So not-for-profits need quality information to get into their system, and they need to have comfort that that information is correct. Access to that information needs to be efficient and timely. Getting your information in easy, that's great. But if there's heaps of rework at the other end, you're going to have problems from an efficiency and accuracy perspective. Lastly, in terms of control of data, processes need to be in place for an organisation so that information gets into the accounting system, entered by the right people at the right time, and the right approvals need to be made. We've seen some real life examples of this failing where email approvals are used. We've seen instances where emails have been intercepted or spoofed to look like they're from an approver and requesting payment. That's not really going to the right place. This can result in real financial consequences in the tens of thousands. Now I'll pass you back to Barry, who's going to talk us through the 3 Ps and how they can help with some of these challenges.
Great. Talking about process, me getting the hang of this PowerPoint's a good starting point, isn't it? So look, I just want to talk about the 3 Ps and look, use Google. It'll give you all sorts of in-depth information. So I'll just touch on it on a high level here. And process is effectively how you do things, your procedures, you know, what's the way forward. People obviously is people, but it really is talking about how you consult with people before a change, how you involve people in a change process, how you train them and support them afterwards. And product, just because it's PPS didn't sound right, product is really about the software tools or software stacks. And it's really important, and we've found this with a lot of projects, to have all these elements and consider them in every change management process you go through. Because if I pick on Xero, which by the way is an awesome software, but it's not magic. So if you've got a particular problem, want to update your finance system, just shoving Xero in, it isn't going to help. You need to have the other elements as well. So I guess why they're actually, maybe examples about why each of those elements are important. It's if you don't undertake some of these elements. For example, let's say team to start with, you might have an awesome software stack, your processes are clearly written out and understood and revisited, but you haven't trained your people, or you haven't brought them along on the change journey, or you haven't supported them afterwards, or give them a safe space to actually go through the grieving process. Because typically when you have system change, no matter how good it is, if it's different, we don't like it. You know, and if I think about our own practice and accounting practice, you know, a bunch of accountants, we're not great with change either, and I've seen it over and over again, and sometimes it just takes time. So then moving on to processes, if processes aren't, if they're unclear, they're outdated, or they're too complicated when you're making a change process, what happens is people just ignore them, or they'll do what they were doing before. And we've seen a lot of examples where you'll put in a new software, you'll train some people, but you're just basically duplicating what you had before. So it's a good chance to actually have a think about that. And then we go to product, and we're going to give you some ideas today about that, but if it's not configured properly, doesn't have the functionality needed, it's difficult to use, once again, people either won't use it or they'll use it incorrectly. And I think part of these things, it's really important, you can't overstate the 3 together, because if you don't have them operating in tandem and trio, then potentially you'll lose the benefits of any change, but worse, you may actually open up some risks. Okay, so talking about problems, and I guess the first one we come across quite a bit, even still now, is lots of organisations have paper-based systems. And there's all sorts of risks about having paper. You know, it can be anything from double payments, losing paper, efficiencies, timing. And what we've found is if you've got a paper-based system, things like with audits and that, I know we all enjoy filing. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember having to file, but if you're getting to the end of the audit process and you're being searched for a particular invoice from one of the auditors, it can be very difficult to find in paper. We also find that it makes working remotely quite difficult. You know, we've seen cases where a folder of invoices will be couriered between different locations to be assigned and authorised, and then back to someone else to be payments to be authorised, to actually make the payments themselves. So that's a real difficulty. And we find a lot of people use hybrid systems as well, some paper, some software. So we'll come back to a solution later on. Effort and timeliness. With timeliness, what we're talking about there's no point in getting your March quarter results to budget holders or decision makers late April or early May. You know, you're talking up to a month to 2 months later. If you're managing a budget and money's tight, you really want to know if you're under so you can spend more, or over really quickly. Otherwise, you can get to the end of that next month and you've overspent. And of course, we have very little tolerance often with funders to do that. And we've got to really juggle around. The other part of that element that we see around pressure points is effort. If you've got an inefficient system or paper-based system, it just takes longer to do everything. And we've found cases too where sometimes it's taken so long with missed payment dates, and actually people don't enjoy that sort of stuff. So to be able to free it up would be awesome. Lack of insights. This is a real bugbear for me. The amount of time I see reports coming out of a system for NFPs, and they're written by accountants for accountants, and it's just really hard to understand what the heck they're actually saying. What does it matter? What do we do? And unfortunately, I think my profession doesn't always help in this area. The last one I want to touch on is controls and safety. You know, it's really difficult if you don't have a electronic or live control over payments. If it's all invoice paper-based, you can get to the stage where you can't tell if you're actually complying with your own delegated authorities. You can't tell if you paid things twice. It may take months later before you realise you've actually broken your own rules. That's a really important one. It's very common as well. So look, it's not all doom and gloom. Now we're going to go into the sort of the oh, sorry, beg your pardon. I got ahead of myself there. We're running a poll. Sorry.
Yeah, we'd actually like to hear from you guys as well. What do you see are some of the top pressure points for the organizations that you work with? We'll give this about 30 seconds for everyone to respond to the poll. And in the meantime, I'd actually like to take a bit of a pause and read some of our audience have been really interactive. I love it. So, you know, we've actually got some responses on the challenges. So I'd like to read some of those out as well. We've got stakeholder, sorry, I'll start off with the top one here. Forecasting due to the erratic nature of income is a bit of a challenge in the not-for-profit. Stakeholder expectations in an EV-based not-for-profit. Erratic nature of income, because there are multiple funding streams. That's a good one to manage and report against. Another challenge is we don't know what we don't know. I think that's in all organizations, right? And yeah, that's a good one. Often the person running these systems wears multiple hats, so might not be an expert in that area, but doesn't actually know what questions need to be asked to help improve things. Really interesting insights.
Yeah, I think so, Hill. I'm just thinking about one of the outputs of this. We may actually release, look at these questions, release some comments about them perhaps to the group later as well, because I think this would be, the questions are being asked. I think there's a wider audience that would really love to understand and discuss it. That might be something we could do. Absolutely,
and we've actually got the results from the poll as well. 45% of the attendees think effort and timeliness is one of the major pressure points. That's a top one. Then it leads by, so the next one is control and safety, lack of insights. All of them are actually pretty relevant in this case.
Great.
We are in the right room, Barry.
That's lucky. That's lucky. Okay, I'll move on to that. Now we've talked about all the bad things. Let's talk about some of the good things, I guess. And some of these things are going to be patently obvious. I think I'm just going to touch on some of the 4 things I've just talked about, paper and so on. So look, the answer with paper is pretty much the same thing. Don't use it. Use systems that are electronic and talk to each other, and use the 3 Ps obviously to deal with those. But if we can avoid killing any trees, you're probably on the right track. Shocking advice there. Same with the effort and timeliness. Once again, having a joined up system using those 3 Ps. That's an obvious one, and we'll talk more about that later. Actually, I'm getting a bit repetitive here. Controls and safety, same thing. Joined up systems that actually make this alive. What I will do, just expand a little bit on the insights, because this is another one of my many hobby horses. And what I'll say here is that what we've found that works well, and I'll be interested once again in the chat if people have got other things to add in, when you're producing the reports to make them actually useful, especially across a wide audience, because it's actually accountants are sort of the weird ones here. We can read some of these reports, but actually most people, they want something easier to digest so they can make decisions. So some hints there we've got are use dashboards or 1 pages, keep it small, keep it simple, using a mix of traffic lights or colors to help people focus on the things that are bad, good, or otherwise. Have the commentary on the report, not 14 pages later or 14 pages long. What we've also started doing the last few years is writing explanations in small print at the bottom of the reports, because often I found when we were producing reports and someone would say, what the hell is a budget variance? What does that actually mean? So we'd write a little explanation in plain English, using rolling forecasts, keep things looking ahead. And I love Excel as well. I think Excel is one of your best friends when it comes to reporting, but we'll talk about that a bit later on as well. Now, I think I'm actually, it feels like I've talked too much. I'm going to hand back to Sahil for the next slide.
Yes, thank you, Barry. So look, the concept of the 3 Ps that Barry talks about is actually a really interesting one. And I'd actually urge everyone to Google it and find out more about it, because in some cases, people have done different variations of it, added more Ps to it. So in some cases, I think it's 6 Ps as well. So it's a really interesting one to look at. But from the process optimization and the product perspective, I think automation is the foundation for the 3 Ps. And any kind of optimization effort relies heavily on advanced automation. And for finance function, the ultimate goal is of automating anything is to achieve reliable and actionable data, which can then be used in the future. To achieve the required quality of data and to ensure it is sustainable when required to scale up and to expand to new services and other clients as well, workflow automation then becomes essential. It becomes important to eliminate the need for manual interventions or disintegrated systems and effectively replace them with seamless end-to-end processes that reduce friction. Another element is the adoption of guardrails for spend tracking and authorization, which are effectively achieved through financial controls such as policy documents, approval matrices, to make sure nothing goes beyond what has been agreed upon, and exceptions handling with such rules and procedures as well. So if something is not in line, such policies and procedures and regulations can bring everything back on track. And ultimately, automation is delivered through applications and products, right? So that's what we're going to look at in terms of what the solutions could be. Obviously, we talked quite a lot about the 3 Ps and the problems. We want to look at how the right processes and the solutions can fix the problem. So I'll hand over to Jadene to discuss some of the solutions that Grant Thornton has been providing to their clients.
Thanks, Sahil. Now we're back to my flow chart, but this time we're just focusing on how we get the information in and how we can use software and products to get that to be more efficient. So there's lots and lots of options out there available to deliver on the needs of a not-for-profit's finance function. We've basically developed what we call a stack of our favorites that we recommend, and they provide the benefits of a big boy accounting system, but without the corresponding complexity and cost. In our experience, they serve most not-for-profits really well, and they save them time and money when compared to assessing each product individually. Generally, your normal good practice is to understand all the needs of the organization, its processes and its risks and its opportunities. Then you make a needs document and assess each software out there against that document in order to make a decision. For small to medium not-for-profits, it's a bit much and it's often not required. So that's why we've done this shortcut of creating our recommended ones. We almost always recommend Xero as an accounting system for not-for-profits. It is really good in that it connects to and from other software as and where required. You only pay for what you're actually going to use and what you need. It does the basics really well. You can't change too much about it, but generally you don't need to. And so that's why we default to it, unless a not-for-profit would need something that sits outside the usual. In terms of your data capture, we've got heaps of options here. Your Xero bank feeds have you covered for revenue and expenses that hit your bank, and that covers lots of the small not-for-profits. And then when you get to the next step up of having invoices, we go to Dext, Auto Entry, HubDoc, and Vend. Also, Xero expenses are really good when you've got expense claims for staff, or if you want to keep track of receipts and that kind of thing in relation to credit cards. We see that a lot. For payroll, we love Smart Payroll. It's loved by those who are getting paid because it has an easy to use app, and preparers and approvers find it really intuitive and easy to use as well. It has great connectivity to your bank and to IRD. It cuts down on so much double handling and paperwork. It also provides you with really strong mandating and recording of approvals. Lastly, I wanted to talk about Approvalmax and using that for spend approval and control. Approvalmax connects to your accounting system and it enforces the delegation authorities. We normally use it for credit invoices, but it can also be used for purchase orders, credit notes, and debtor invoices. It records who approved what and when, and it automatically attaches the appropriate record to your accounting system. Makes your life so much easier at audit time. You can give your auditor read-only access to your Xero, for example, and let them find out the information rather than having to go through to your filing cabinet. Now I'll pass this back to Sahil as he's going to go through some more information on the data inflow that I've been talking about and how Approvalmax fits into this process.
Thank you, thank you, Jadene. Yes, so you've given us a bit of an overview on Approvalmax, which is great. Now, this is an example of a standard data flow by connecting the apps, which offers a very seamless integration process. In the first section, what you see are different varieties of the data capturing tools. Now, depending on what your requirements are, you can take a look at some of those apps. By using some of these apps, you can simply take a photo of an invoice or upload it in the system of choice. The data capturing software will effectively extract the required information from the invoices and automatically send them through to your accounting ledger, in this case, Xero, for approval. With the exception of Dext, where we have a direct integration that can send invoices directly into Approvalmax as well. Now, as soon as we have the invoice in Approvalmax, that's where Approvalmax takes the invoice through a preset, well-defined process of approvers, of approval stages, and it allows matching of purchase order with bills, and effectively ensures that the required stakeholders have approved a particular invoice before pushing it back into your accounting software ready to be paid. Now, for not-for-profit organizations, this offers an extremely reliable, streamlined end-to-end flow of information through which better spend control measures can be put in. We talked about adding guardrails. So through this, we can add better spend control measures. The stakeholders can simply approve invoices from either email or a notification on the mobile app. So it becomes a timely process, going back to Barry's point on being timely. And only bills that have been approved go into the accounting ledger, effectively making sure that any bills that haven't gone through the process of approval are not paid. This in effect helps with things like fraud detection and prevention as well before it's too late. And finally, you get an audit report of the entire flow of approvals with dates, with stamps, with the names of people who have approved invoices. It gets attached to each transaction. It can be extracted from within Approvalmax at a summary level as well. So going back to Barry's point on the 3 Ps, and specifically the process element, a well-defined, a reliable process is key to getting actionable insights from your finance systems. And now that we've talked about some of the ways the input of the data can be streamlined and the output can be derived, I'll pass over to Jadene to talk more about the expectations from the outputs that we get from the systems.
Great, thanks, Sahil. I've had a great question. Well, firstly, I've had a great comment in the chat from Jeanette. Oh, sorry, there was a comment in the chat, I'm not sure who it was, that Xero is great for reporting as well. And that's definitely something that we agree with. We also had a question about Xero and its reporting for not-for-profits. Does Xero do dashboard and graph style reports that can give your board a brief overview without needing to give them too much information? And to answer that question or those comments, we love Xero for preparing annual financials and for your simple periodic reporting in your actuals to budget, that kind of information. There are some formatting limitations. You are a bit restricted, but you do get some great efficiencies from being linked directly to your ledger. If you want to get more into your graphs and your dashboards for insights, as Barry mentioned earlier, we do default to Excel. You are able to configure it to display or calculate exactly what you want to get your desired insights or provide desired insights to decision makers. Using those tools that we've discussed earlier about data capture can give you really clean information, which cuts down your rework before your data is exported and placed into an Excel report. Now, using Excel is not without its risks. There are risks of error, so we always recommend upskilling of your team and investment in good templates to mitigate this if this is something that you'd like to do. Now, we're all accountants and some people well, not all of us, sorry. Many of us are accountants and some of us, Excel just makes us feel ill. And if that's the case, we'd recommend Spotlight for reporting and forecasting. It's less customizable than Excel, but it does provide really nice looking reports and graphs. And you do get some efficiencies as the information is directly linked to your Xero. Another outside of the outputs that we'd like to go through is just to talk about Board Pro and how this can give some really great efficiencies in the not-for-profits governance process. It allows for all of the governance docs being the minutes, agenda, and action tracking all in one place. And it can provide really great process streamlining with document management, interest recording, and the preparation of board packs all in the same place. So moving on from the kind of product focus of our solutions, we wanted to also talk about how not-for-profits can consider services and through that look at outsourcing. This is outsourcing to a specialist payroll provider or an accounting firm or bookkeeper. That's the sort of realm of where we're talking at the moment. And outsourcing allows for a not-for-profit to pay for as little or as much resource as they need. That could be man hours or expertise if there's something specific that they need. And outsourcing can give comfort to the CEO, governance, and funders that the organisation has accurate financial information. And it can also free up management time and give increased efficiencies overall. Outsourcing finance processes can mean that a CE is no longer checking bank account numbers or preparing reports. You're out delivering the strategic objectives of the organisation and doing the mahi that matters. It also provides you with increased efficiency as outsourcers are professionals. They do this day in, day out. They're well practiced and they're up to date with training and changes in legislation. Gives you an opportunity to strengthen internal controls as well, especially in a small finance team where one person wears many hats. I saw in the chat earlier that that's something that is a problem for many not-for-profits, and we've seen it time and time again. Involving an external party in your payroll or credit preparation can make this process and the controls associated with it much more robust. provides you with a lot of stability as well. If an organization is reliant on one finance manager and that person suddenly falls ill, it can lead to a situation where people are not getting paid, which we do not want. If you're using an external provider, it does remove that sort of risk, as the external provider is responsible for the service delivery. And you don't have to outsource and never see the finance process again. It can be the start of a journey to build capability in-house within the organization. We enjoy working with so many of our outsourcing clients to build their internal finance team capability, and we continue to support them in the background where they need, but they move into the driver's seat with the financial process. Now that I've hyped up all the benefits of outsourcing, I would like to hear from you guys in the audience, and just to see whether you would consider outsourcing in your organization. So we'll have a poll, which you should see on your screen now, and I'll pass over to Sahil to talk us through.
Yeah, thank you, Jadene. Before people start answering this poll as well, I'd just like to highlight that it can be a confusing subject. So outsourcing doesn't necessarily mean offshoring. You can take a small part of your internal process and outsource it to anyone else in the same country, another firm, an expert. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking the process out and it's going to another country. Just wanted to highlight that so there's no confusion about outsourcing and offshoring. We'll just give it another 30 seconds. We'll give everyone an opportunity to respond to the poll. Would you consider outsourcing? And this could be for any function. I think I know of quite a lot of firms that outsource their marketing functions. As accountants, they may not necessarily be experts in marketing, so I've seen that quite a bit. Barry's laughing at that. Another maybe 15 seconds or 10 seconds before we close the poll. All right, we have closed the poll. So some of the responses that have come up, it is for a lot of the guys, it is not a priority, then that is fine. But there are some firms that already do this. That's really exciting to see as well, and would be interested in finding out more. So there are some who would be interested in finding out more as well. So we'll get in touch and we'll discuss that in a bit more detail. Thank you everyone for sharing your insights.
Thank you for that, everyone. And the last cab off the rank that we have in terms of solutions that we wanted to talk through was our case studies. We've got a few different examples to go through that just demonstrate some examples of these pressure points we've discussed in a real life situation, and some ways that we've worked through solving them using the 3 Ps. And the first case study that I want to talk to you about is about a membership organisation, an incorporated society that supports over 4,500 members. Now, their before state was really paper heavy, and they had some data management, and the team had some negative attitudes towards change. We implemented some new processes with their delegations and used products like Dext and Approvalmax and Smart Payroll, which gave them some great efficiencies. In this example, we really wanted to highlight the people element of the change. This team had several senior staff that were familiar with the existing processes and didn't see the need for any change. They were really of the if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of attitude. And we solved that problem with some really key training and support and communication with people. We did that through our work that we do with this client. We support them by having one of our team members on site 1 day a week, and we provide them with remote support outside of those times. The on-site and face-to-face training allowed for all of the staff of this organisation to be trained correctly. We were there to follow up on questions that they had later down the line, and were able to check in and just confirm that processes were being followed as they were supposed to be. And we also had remote support in this area when we weren't there on site. This face-to-face support allowed for the process to be smoother and more engaging, as it removed the big frustration that many people have when they're trying to work out a new app or a new software on their own. And I just will pass you through to Barry, who's going to take us through our next case study. And this one highlights some really cool products that were key to a change.
Unmute. Yeah, great. Okay, thanks, Jadene. Look, I think this one sort of comes out as a bit of a, sounds like a love letter to Approvalmax, and it really is. So I'm not going to apologise for that to start with, but look, this was a registered charity that provided accommodation and meals to medium and short-term stayers, so in some pastoral care as well. So they do some really good work. They had a few challenges. The finance team wasn't on the same premises. Significant manual processing time, large paper piles of paper, and you know, I had been one of the payment authorisers on this for a long time, and I got to the stage where I would get twice a month a large folder full of invoices that I had to flip, and I'm talking large, it'd be, I don't know, 200, and that took a lot of time, and of course that caused difficulty too when the accounting team, the service deliverers and the authorisers, because we had 2 authorisers, were all in different places. So moving the paper around caused all sorts of problems. And we did have a few close calls around overpayment or missed payments. And there was no software in place. It was good old stamping the invoice, signing it, and going from there. And look, what we did, we applied the 3 Ps, because the software, well, once again, Approvalmax is pretty awesome, but it's not magic. So by doing the training and some of the processes, we put that in place, and the outcome was absolutely marketed. So someone like me who's just outsourced as an authoriser, it probably went down to 20 minutes a month. It meant that I could see right from the start the capture of the data. I could see who'd already looked at it, who'd approved it, who'd written comments on it. When I spot checked some of the payments, I can write a little note. And we got some really good feedback from the auditors, and we do for a lot of everything we use these stacks for, because we could just give access, read access, don't like them fiddling, to the various softwares, including Xero, and they can go and have a look themselves. They don't have to ask for invoices. They could see when I'd actually rejected or asked for more information, or just written, checked it, looks okay, this is what I looked at, signed Barry. So, and that was all locked in. So that made a huge amount of difference, and it meant that our reports sped up, and we just didn't lose invoices because you couldn't. So, like I said, it's a bit of a love letter to Approvalmax, but it made a huge difference, and it cut down their fees, you know, because the time there just didn't take long. So then, just that might dovetail nicely into the third one. This is probably more about the insights. This is another membership organisation, and they had, you know, typical paper-driven processes, manual processing, you know, spread out. The processes led to problems when we were producing reports for the management and the board, in that they were always coming out late, so we weren't giving the board much time to read them. And to be honest, you were rushing, so the chances of making a mistake were really high. And it did happen. It's very embarrassing going in front of a board and explaining, here's the new version, please don't look at the old one. And that's simply because the systems didn't allow us to actually process that in time. The bit I want to focus on there, it's more of a process piece, is the reports are just terrible. They were, even for someone like me with, you know, classical training, I could read them, but didn't understand what they were saying. What did they mean? What was I supposed to do with it? Very number heavy, very technical language. And so we went through a process with both management, the team, and the board to say, okay, what do you actually want to see? And then we picked up on, I think someone made a comment earlier in the chat, you know, people don't know what questions to ask or what they need to do. So we helped them with that as well. And so we got to the end, and this took quite a few months. It was an iterative process. But by the end of it, the reports, I think we shaved like 6 pages off, added a few graphs, and it was actually answering the questions, including what does it mean? Now, look, one thing I will touch on here, and I blame Spotlight for this because they've made it too easy and too awesome, is accountants, including us, and a lot of people went a bit nuts on the graphs. So I think we moved from these heavy number reports to moving too much into graphs, and you have 15 graphs that you didn't actually need. Graphs are awesome, but too much data overwhelms people. And I'll come back to our point about talking about Excel. Now we'll pick up too, someone in the chat has said, suggested another software to look at, which we will, Clax, I think it's pronounced. So there are other options. These are the stacks that we're using at the moment, but we're always open for other suggestions. So look, I think that's me, actually. Yeah.
Thank you, Barry. Before we go into the Q&A session, look, on behalf of Approvalmax, I'd like to thank you, Barry and Jadene, for taking the time and sharing your valuable insights. I'm sure our listeners have found today's session extremely valuable, so thank you. And with that, we've got a number of questions that I'd like to bring up here. So, is it possible to get a copy of Jadene's NFP finance process flowchart? Absolutely, we'll be sending out a recording. You will get a copy of the flowchart. We know it's a popular one. And some comments. What is VN that has been responded to? And I'll just go into the Q&A. Does Xero have some reporting for NFPs, dashboards, graphs, style reports that give the board a brief overview without needing to give them too much information? Would be really useful.
Yeah, I might take a bit of that, and Jade, and you can correct me afterwards. I just want to acknowledge the sentiment about giving perhaps the boards too much, and that might be the old, I'm assuming it's the old, oh, why have we spent so much on telephone? Or they go down a rabbit hole. I assume that's what that means, but no. Xero has some cool number-based reports, and you can do some pretty good formatting, but it doesn't do dashboards. But it's a great flow through to Excel or to Spotlight or similar. Jadene, do you agree?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I agree that it's a tricky balance to get the required information for decisions, but without hitting those rabbit holes. So it's about combining not just the numbers or the graphs, but also providing a short and succinct story that explains what it all means. Makers.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Yeah. That's what we got.
Thank you, guys. Are there any further questions on that particular question? Well, we'll move on to the next one in the meantime. Can anyone share their thoughts on the efficiency of how Xero works with Power BI in terms of reporting? Yeah, that's the question. Xero integration with Power BI.
I mean, we haven't done a lot of it because normally when we use Power BI, it's with much bigger finance systems, but I understand they talk to each other quite well. So apart from, yes, have a go, I can't really add any insight to that, Jadene.
I would have to say I'm the same there, Barry. It's not something that I've extensively played around with, sorry.
There are some questions in chat. Do you want me to have a... Yep.
Yeah, I'm just going through one of those now.
Okay, sweet.
We are a membership organization supporting 50,000 members. I've been told Xero is too small for us. What's your thought?
That's an interesting one because we've got a few clients like that. And well, by the way, well done. That's a lot of members. Because especially if you're using subscription methodology to push it through the transaction levels, it'll choke Xero. It's too big. But what we've done with other organizations with similar pieces, you basically use Xero as the accounting package and you have the bank account or process that sits outside. You need something else for capturing the payments and invoices and receipts. And often your membership system will do that. Then you push through a summary. It's like the old, for those who have been around 100 years like me, it's the old control accounts. So that means you don't put through all the transactions but you put a summary through out of a third-party membership or billing system. Because, and Jadene, I think we talked about this morning actually, it will grind to a halt. You would kill Xero with that many transactions.
Yeah, if you were running that level of transaction, if you were trying to invoice all 50,000 members or put all their payments through, an absolute nightmare, unfortunately.
Thank you, guys. I'd just like to go back to the Power BI question. We've actually had some other attendees respond to that, so I'd like to read some of those responses. Someone said, I found Power BI really clunky to use with Xero, better off with Excel. Someone else has said Xero has a function called Business Snapshot found in the business drop-down menu. And someone has said, we were going to go with Power BI and went with Calxa instead. So Calxa has been talked about in some of the other comments as well. It is a good reporting tool for not-for-profits.
This comes up, and I think we're going to go away and have another look. And maybe just to comment on that, one of the reasons that we actually ended up having a stack, it's an opportunity cost thing, because what we're finding is when we're going to clients, the assessment phase and trying to choose what software took an awful lot of time. And so unfortunately, sometimes that means you stop looking because you've got something that works. But when we've something like this, when that name keeps coming up, we will absolutely go away and have a look at it, because we're if it's being recommended, that means people are using it, does what it needs. And maybe if it can replace Excel to some degree, that would be good.
Thank you, Barry. Another question has come up. What is the average implementation time, including change management for Approvalmax?
That one, that will depend on, because we're talking about the 3 Ps itself. You know, the planning, and depending what you're going to and going from. Because if you think about a very basic change management process, you know, you always start with gap analysis. You say, right, what have we got now? What do we need? Who wants what? How are we going to get there? And so it's that how we're going to get there bit in the middle is tricky. You know, do you have to clean your data? Have you got lots of people to train? Have you got 500 people? You know, it depends. Jadene, the actual setup of Approvalmax doesn't take bugger all time, does it? It's the other stuff. Huh?
No, so actually setting up Approvalmax, depending on the complexity of the delegation authority, can take me about 5 minutes. It's more about the process and the training, I would say. The actual setup is very, 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 very quick.
Yeah, I can comment on that as well. So Approvalmax, I mean, there's some of the workflows in the setup can be as simple as you'd like it to be, or as complex as you want to create them. And so it really is case dependent. And in a lot of the cases, I think the setup is fairly simple and quick, but we have seen some extremely complicated workflows that people have set up. So, you know, it can work on a case by case basis. It is a scalable solution for the process required. Okay, so just going back to the question around 50,000 members, someone else has commented, we have 40,000 but don't invoice them, so perhaps check that option. We do have a bespoke member management system which emails reminders when memberships are due. I love this. This is really interactive. There are some questions coming up, but other attendees are responding, which is really, really nice. Good. That's exactly what knowledge share is. Someone else has said, I'm using Calxa as I need to report on Xero tracking categories. So Calxa allows them to do that. And I've recently subscribed to Data Deer, which pulls Xero data into Excel.
Yep, that's a good one too.
I saw one question in the chat asking if Xero can generate payment files to upload for banks to pay and stuff. And yes, it certainly can. You can create what it calls a batch. Say you want to pay these 20 invoices, make a batch, it extracts the file, which you can really easily upload into your banking system. It's one of my favorite features of Xero.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you for picking Yeah, I missed that. Thanks for picking that up. Thanks for picking that up, Jadene. Actually, I think with some of the banks, it also directly integrates in terms of the batch. ASB, yeah. So you don't even have to download and upload; it just directly goes through. Another one has come up here. Does anyone know about Workday solution? I've heard the solution works pretty well for not-for-profit organizations.
I'm sorry, I don't.
We might see if other attendees would like to answer that. I don't see any other questions. Actually, no, the Q&A.
There's a couple more in Q&A.
Okay, yeah. How easy is it to extract the audit trail from Approvalmax for changes to delegated authorities? Ooh, it'll be great to actually show you, Heather, but very quickly, there is a report section in Approvalmax which effectively allow, there are some preset reports in there. However, then you can customize and add some filters depending on what you want to achieve out of the reports. You can add the filters and export them out of Approvalmax. So I mean, it's pretty quick, probably about 5, maybe 10 minutes to pull out a report. But I'm happy to get in touch with you after the webinar and maybe show you exactly how the audit can be pulled out from Approvalmax, or audit report can be pulled out. Another one has come up. Are there many NFPs using the Approvalmax budget checking during purchase order approvals, as we're looking at using this feature? Thank you, Priscilla, for that question. So budgeting in Approvalmax is a feature in beta, but we are, I think it's ready to be rolled out soon. Happy to sort of work through that with you to set it up in the organizations you have got on Approvalmax, and then we're actually looking to get some feedback on that, on how it works, what it does for you, and actually what you'd like to achieve out of that as well. But have you used it, Barry or Jadene? Have you used the feature yet for any organization?
No, but we are watching interest. Yeah.
So there's more information to follow on that.
Yeah. I just see one interesting one there. Board registers compliant. I'm pretty sure Board Pro do that actually from memory. I need to double check that, but I'm pretty sure Board Pro look after the registers as well.
Yeah, they do look after the registers and all that. Probably the part we'd want to find out more information on would be how that works for a situation like this, where there's 10 organisations that have the same board of directors. That's probably the big question.
Yeah, you can do subcommittees in that as well. It might be good to talk to them directly about how you might set that up. But I can guarantee my love affair with Excel disappears when you hit this sort of stuff.
I've got another one here. What credit card reconciliation software is best for NFPs? Any thoughts?
In our experience, we generally, if we can, will get a credit card using the bank feeds for Xero, because that gets most of the data into there and it's very easy to clear. But if you're talking about sort of tying the receipts and that sort of information to those, then I believe Xero Expenses does that quite well.
Someone has said we use Flexi Purchase,
right,
for credit card management. Okay, and we've got, does Approvalmax work with MBIB Advanced? Sorry, not at the moment. It is, that's a short answer. It doesn't work at the moment with MBIB Advanced, only with Xero and QBO at the moment.
No, thank you.
Just conscious of time. We've got a minute before we. But yeah, I love the interaction. This is really, really good. Does Xero have the capacity to upload credit card receipts? Yes, it does.
If you've got an electronic copy of the receipt, then you can definitely upload it into your Xero against a transaction.
Brilliant.
People have said there are a few tools out there which can sort of cut down that time of you having to scan it, download it, upload it, all that sort of thing. Where Expensify and Xero Expenses comes in.
And your phone.
Yes.
All right, everyone. I think just conscious of time, we will. I don't see any other questions that have come up, so we will end here. But as I mentioned at the beginning, a copy of the recording will be sent to all those who attended. If we have missed any questions, we will endeavor to get back to you very soon after the webinar. But thank you very, very much for attending today. Your interaction has been extremely valuable. We've picked up some insights, and thank you, Barry and Jadene, for coming along and sharing some of your experience today with our listeners.
Thanks for having us. It's been really great.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day. And enjoy the Anzac weekend.
Yes, long weekend.